You're listening to Readers and Writers with your host, James Hill and Athena Paris, and I am Amy, and we have a special guest today, Haley Kilgour, and we are talking medieval magic. So you guys, how do you want to kick it off? How's it going?
Well, it's going really well, and Haley is one of our writers from Rock Hill Publishing. She wrote The Noggin. Did I get it right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, you did.
because I pronounced that title every different way you can imagine. And it is a story which takes place in a faraway land, a mystical place, and her faraway land is set in like a medieval times. And so we want to talk to Haley about why did she set a story in mythical times or medieval times, and what lends magic to that type of setting. So Haley, let's first talk about a few other things first with Haley. Let's talk about her book tour, because she has a book tour coming up, and I think she would be very proud to give that a kind of announcement. So Haley, tell us about it.
So we've got a book tour coming up with Storygram Tours, if I can speak today, on Instagram. And there's going to be 7 different hosts, and they're going to be doing all sorts of really fun stuff with my book. And there's also going to be a giveaway. So this is a great chance for you to get a copy of The Noggin, because it's not the cheapest thing, but it's not cheap because it's technically a book and a half mashed into one. It's very long, it's dense, but it's well worth it.
It's what I call a bullet stopper, Haley. You put that inside your jacket in case you have to go through a hail of bullets. But yes, it's very good. I mean, you wrote a very interesting and unique type of book, and like I said, got a lot to do with magic and a special brand of magic. So tell us about that. Tell us about the type of magic you talk about.
So the magic system, it's a great way to think about it is if you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's a very similar system to that. You've got people who control the elements. So you've got fire, water, air, earth, and I also throw in life, spellcasting, and telepathy. So there's just, a few other elements to that. But, it does generally follow the same rules of everyone gets an element. If you have magic, it's just the one, except for, of course, our main character who has all of them. And it's kind of in the story, this just weird, crazy thing, but I've actually plotted it out, and it's actually a complete genetic mutation caused by the Noggins, which are the portals that transport people between worlds. But so it's not actually just a weird freak accident. There's a whole system to it, and because I'm a scientist, of course, I figured out the genetics of everything for it. So yeah, I'm totally a nerd.
All right, so Athena has good words for the type of magic you talk about. I just call it elemental magic, but she went diving into the type of magic that there is. So Athena, give us a little background on what you know about magic.
Well, it's interesting because obviously different writers use different systems, and usually they work on a range and effect of the magic that they create. And in other words, they target, they figure out who's targeted by the effects of the magic. And is the magic physical, mental, or other? Of course, like Haley says, she has the elements, and then she threw in telepathy, which then that is a mental or almost psychological, spiritual kind of magic. And then of course we get the results that come out of after you've used the magic, and that is always very interesting because it shows how she shifts and changes the world every time she uses her magic within the system. And of course I'm very interested to know if Haley, having the background that she does, because I know that she's English and Italian somehow, and those two cultures have very deep magical legends and myths of things, that they've created. So I've wondered if Haley drew from that, maybe listening to stories like King Arthur, the Roman Empire, the Roman gods and things like that, if she drew from that to create her world.
So not really. I kind of drew everything into my world because of the reader I am. I'm a huge fan of fantasy. So I like just, that weird element that's just like, this is not real life, which is just makes it so much more fun. So that's kind of why I have, the dragons and the mermaids and all the other crazy stuff going on. It's fun. And it's just a way to step away from everything and be like, this is not what life could be like. This is just something fun,
Yeah.
Well, Haley, tell me, do you think that medieval times lend more to magical stories, and why? I have my own opinions on that, but I like
Oh,
to hear
yeah.
from you about why do you think that medieval times lends itself more to like these magical stories?
Well, there's two main reasons. The first one is Tolkien. So pretty much modern day fantasy all is based off of Tolkien's Middle Earth kind of thing. He set the precedent. So you had all this magic and he kind of set that. So everyone else is kind of like, okay, well, we've got to follow his example because he's the first big fantasy writer that kind of came about. The other reason I think magic and medieval times kind of go together is because when you have your modern world and you have that technology, magic isn't needed, you get shot with an arrow, cool. But the chance of you dying are pretty slim to none. You're not relying on herbs, to cure things, and you can travel underwater and all these crazy things that seem magical but aren't because of the technology. So when you take those concepts and put them in a time that doesn't have that technology, it becomes magical and it kind of creates a sense of, okay, this is not something that's normal. Whereas if you look at how those things would happen in modern times, you'd see like, oh yeah, no, that's totally a reasonable thing to have happen. And I think the other thing too is that we kind of romanticize the medieval period because knights in shining armor and save the princess, and it's just kind of one of those fun things where it's just like it's so long ago that we don't feel a true connection to it, where it's like you can definitely feel connected to the Victorian era. I mean, there were photographs, but all we've got from the medieval time is painting, so it's not like there's truly tangible kind of ways to connect with that unless you're physically sitting in like a castle.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a big fan of Tolkien, of course, and I read Tolkien in high school, probably around the time you were born, if not before. And I really didn't start reading Tolkien until it came up in the Led Zeppelin song. And then I was carrying the book around with me because I went to Catholic school and we had to carry our Bible. And so I wasn't going to read the Bible, but I bought Tolkien's book because it looked the same as this big brown Bible that I had to carry. And when the priests were looking there, they see the book and they was like, all right, you can go. We got our bag checked in and out of school. So I carried Tolkien around with me for a while. And then, Led Zeppelin came up with the Ramble On. And in that song, he speaks about going through the depths of Mordor and searching for the girl and all that kind of stuff. And then I realized he was talking about Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, and I had already read Bilbo's story,
The Hobbit.
The Hobbit. Yes, I already read The Hobbit, so I was like, oh, let me read this. I'm carrying it back and forth to school. Let me read this. So then I started reading the Lord of the Rings, and like you say, he was really the first fantasy writer that kind of like threw in magic and the whole different ideas, the different worlds, the Middle Earth, blah, 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 and all of that kind of stuff. So as a fantasy writer, it kind of like intrigued me with that idea that you had to split between technology and magic. And like technology, like you say, technology kind of like killed off magic. But before then, and we go back to the Middle Ages, and people did believe in these things. They believed in spells and they believed in witchcraft and they believed everything had some kind of spiritual, magical type of quality to it. But they didn't have the technology. They didn't have, those who did have it didn't believe in magic. The scientists of the day and the people like that, they didn't believe in magic, but they knew most of the people didn't have that knowledge. And therefore they controlled the population with the ideas of spirits and God and all this kind of stuff. And it really was a way to control people's lives at that time. And so, like you said, we don't have any real connection to something that happened 500-600 years ago. That as we do something that happened more recently, 100-200 years ago, you have people who are still bringing you those stories, your grandparents and telling you your great grandparents' story and all that kind of stuff. So that's not so far removed. But when you get to 500-600 years ago, you don't have people who can tell you anything about that time period. All you have is books that was written. If anybody wrote about something like that, then they would leave out a lot of the facts that happened, like, and
Yeah.
they would sure.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that's what makes the medieval times so appealing to everyone, right? Because there's this like mystery kind of element to it. So it's almost like you can take medieval times and what we know about it and make it your own with the own like magic and the technology and stuff. So I think I don't know, for me, I find that to be intriguing for like medieval times, especially for writers, because they can kind of, I mean, Haley, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but they kind of can make it their own and what they would kind of think medieval times would be. I think that's inviting for writers.
Well, absolutely, but I feel like you can do that with any world. Like you absolutely have, the genre of urban fantasy, which takes place in modern times. But I mean, there's just again, it's just more of a romanticized kind of time era where it's just you kind of, when you think about going back in time, your general first thing is, yeah, I'm gonna go back to medieval times so I can go storm the castle. It's just kind of, I think it's one of those just kind of things that's been ingrained in us, because I mean, again, you have Tolkien, Narnia, just all of these big kind of stories that everyone knows that happen in medieval times. So it's kind of a safe setting, and it's just something people feel comfortable in because you don't have to create technology. You want to fling something across the room, great, go get a trebuchet. You're not going to have like an atomic bomb or something that's super weird and scientific and not everyone understand. Most people understand what a sword looks like and kind of how it works.
Right. Yeah. I just find it fascinating. Athena, what were you going to say?
Yeah, it's interesting that in fantasies, there's kind of three types of, I don't know what to call it, but almost like a trope. And Haley did something interesting because she basically used a bit of all of them, because there's the chosen few, the freak of nature, and the one who becomes able to use magic through merit because they practice at it. And Haley's story is, like I say, very interesting because she actually took, they're the chosen, they kind of freaks of nature anyway because they are different, and then they have to practice anyway. So she didn't just give them abilities to do things and they throw their fingers in the or hands in the air and things just happen. That it takes time for them to develop. They've got the talent, an innate talent, but then they have to do all the practicing to get good at something. Am I right, Haley?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
she didn't pick one. For reality, you can be naturally
yeah.
good at something, yes. But it's sheer luck until you really hone the skill.
Yes.
It's sort of like being a writer. You have an innate ability to tell a story, but you have to practice at it in order to be able to tell a good story.
Right.
And I think that comes through in Haley's story, where her character Keegan, she wakes up in this world with somewhat of the unknown ability to her at first, and then as she develops and realizes her talent, she actually wants to practice it more and master that talent. And for writers, that's the same thing. We have this yearning or desire to write, but then as we do write, we decide that we want to really become better at it. And so we build our own world and we populate ourselves and all that kind of stuff in it. So
I love that. That's why I love working with writers and with Rock Hill. I mean, you guys are awesome. We are running out of time. So Haley, I want to thank you so much for joining us. this week, and I want everyone to come back next week because we're talking writing routines, how to create one, what is one, what does it look like to have a writing routine? Everyone is different. All of them are different. So check us out next Tuesday at 7. Until then, we'll see you guys next week.
And don't forget to look up Haley on her book tour, because that will be very interesting to see her book and all of the information about it.
Absolutely.